Two, one. Welcome back to ESBR Boxing's YouTube channel. Delighted to be joined by Elliot Grigg. We have seen Alexander Usyk retain his World Heavyweight Championship title, stopping Daniel Dubois in round 9 after dropping Dubois in round 8 as well. Elliot, maybe a more exciting fight than we were expecting, a more competitive fight than we were expecting. But the result that we were expecting, Usyk stopped Dubois in the second half of the fight, which it felt like pretty much everyone was going for pre-fight. Give me your thoughts on what we've just seen.
You know what, man? Like, you agree? Well, thank you very much. Obviously for having me. But I agree with what you're saying, and obviously the sentiment that everyone picked that. So it seems in a way like what happened was as we expected. But I actually think the fight was a lot more exciting actually than I thought it was going to be. I went for sort of I think 6 to 8 in predictions, something like that for the stoppage, assuming that he'd sort of tied Bar out and get to him. But actually, Bar was a lot more live than I thought he was. So a lot more movement than I thought he was necessarily going to show as well. We'll come on to obviously some of the shots he did land, but showed more intent than other sort of British challenges we've seen there with Usyk previously. And I actually think his actual stock coming out of it higher than when he went in, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I think so. I just think that we had a chat off camera after the undercards and the undercard fights. I think we just both said, just Dubois, like, go in there and have a go. Don't just go in there and freeze and get battered about for 6-7 rounds. There's you're very unlikely to win this fight, but you can come out of this fight with a lot of pride and a lot of credit. And I think he has done. I think we saw in the post-fight stuff that I couldn't really hear or understand what Usyk was saying to him. But I do think he's kind of got some respect there. Like, in my opinion, Daniel Dubois, I consider him. I do consider him a top 10 heavyweight. I would love to see him against a lot of the other top 10 heavyweight guys, whether it be Hrgovic, Sang. I don't know. I just think that if you consider he is 25 years old and he's gone there against an elite fighter, held his own, might not have won many rounds, but he's kind of held his own for large periods of that fight. I would say nearly every round was competitive, in my opinion, but wasn't enough. Any other comments you have about Usyk's performance, Elliot? Were you impressed? Was it a good performance by Usyk? Was it not a good performance? Thoughts on the Ukrainian's performance?
It's a tough one because I was kind of expecting him to kind of overwhelm Dubois more so than he did. So in a way, I think Dubois raised his game to the point where obviously the differential, like you were saying, wasn't necessarily as a lot of people thought it was going to be going in. A lot of those rounds were close, but obviously he edged them on the cards and he edged them in the stats as well. Obviously we'll come to the body shot he took, potential body shot he took, but I think it was a lot more competitive, and therefore I suppose it actually shows a bit more negatively on Usyk than it would otherwise if he'd just come in there and sort of like opened Dubois up. But let's be honest, he's got the stoppage. He's got in front of his home fans. But I feel like, in a way, I do actually feel like, we'll come on to this no doubt. Probably we'll talk about Fury and Usyk, but I do almost feel like we've seen maybe the ceiling for Usyk here when it comes to heavyweight. I actually genuinely feel like some of the bigger guys in this division, Fury particularly, will be too much for him. And I think just basing that off the kind of style of fight that he fought tonight as well. And I feel like, don't get me wrong, he's still mobile and he's still obviously throwing, but he doesn't have that concussive one-punch power. And Dubois took his power, obviously, before then. The accumulation obviously fatigued him. So I feel there's also a bit of a limit there. So I actually, in some ways, feel like this performance has been relatively negative, actually, in comparison to what I was expecting going in.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one to unpack, isn't it? Like, remembering Usyk, look, he really is a cruiserweight kind of. He came in, was it 219 pounds at the weigh-in, and that was with kind of what socks and shorts and whatever on. He's not a big guy. He's never going to come in at 245, 250 pounds, anywhere near the sort of weights that likes of Fury and Joshua come in at. That's not how he's built. And you've got to admire what he's achieved. If you consider, like, he fought Joshua in his third fight at heavyweight, his second fight, really, because that Chaz Witherspoon fight was just a bit of a strange one. But what he's achieved is incredible. That brings us on. We'll go back to the fight, but that brings us on nicely to Tyson Fury versus Alexander Usyk. Fury, we know, is fighting Francis Ngannou. That's still a couple of months away, October 28th. There's been rumours this week that Fury versus Usyk could be back on, I believe for January in Saudi Arabia. Say that fight does happen in January, Elliot. Now that we've seen Usyk tonight against Dubois, what are your thoughts on that fight if it was to happen next?
You and I spoke about it on camera before, and we both, I think, picked Fury before this. But even looking at this fight tonight, I'm adamant that Fury wins, and the reason I'm adamant that he wins is simply because you look at the sort of style that Usyk was fighting tonight, and Dubois only 6'3", I think. So sorry, 6'5" with 78-inch reach. Fury's 6'9" with 85-inch reach, and there were times tonight, obviously, where you see Usyk really trying to essentially just extending and stretching forward and trying to actually land those hooks, especially. Some of them were falling short. Obviously, they started to land, obviously, when Dubois got tired, but really was sort of forcing him to sort of come through Dubois in a way to get them in. And I just feel like there's that gap, and then there's Fury, which is an even further gap to cross. And we've seen, I'm not saying Fury is obviously a Wilder one-punch power, but we've seen that he's got power. We've seen what he's obviously done to Wilder. We've seen, obviously, I mean, say what you want about Dillian White, been very negative, but he stopped him. Don't want to talk about Straw. We'll leave that one out of there. But as obviously has developed a different style as well, and I just feel like the actual physical differences between the two are so great that I just don't see him being able to overwhelm that. And like you said as well, he's obviously a small guy at the weight. He's a small heavyweight, frankly. He's not really a natural heavyweight in that way, is he? When you think of the monsters that are a heavyweight in the division. So I just feel like talent, but don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about talent here. Obviously, pound for pound, one of the very best boxers in the world today, and you could almost put him in an all-time great conversation with obviously what he's accomplished in his career. But I just feel like the gulf in class, or the difference in class, will not be overwhelmed, if there is one, by the size factor. I just see Fury beating him, frankly.
Yeah, and I just think, look, I think that's likely what would happen, but we do want to see it. We've been talking about this fight for a little while now. There are some people out there who think that Fury, or think that Usyk would beat Fury. So at the end of the day, we just want to see. We want to just. I don't really care who's right or who's wrong, or who really wins. Really, these guys are the best two heavyweights in the world. Obviously, Fury's gone up against Wilder 3 times. Usyk's gone up against Joshua 2 times. So they're the two that are left, really. And I just do think that I don't see why this fight can't happen in January or February or March, but next for Usyk, basically.
I feel like Usyk's calling for it. I feel like if it doesn't happen, it's Fury's fault that it doesn't happen. It's Fury's responsibility. But I just feel like he'll win. I don't understand why he doesn't make that fight. I think you need that for your record as well, frankly.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. I think Fury needs to fight Usyk. He definitely needs to fight Usyk. Doesn't need to fight Joshua now. Arguably not, but still be nice to see what happens if Joshua faces Wilder. Going back to the fight, Elliot, on the low blow, I've had a quick scan on Twitter after the fight, and just in the past 5 minutes whilst we were chatting, different people saying different things. Look, I'm sure it will emerge what happened. Some might say it's not like Usyk to kind of pretend he's been given a low blow and just kind of go down. There are other people who are saying, look, there's no way that's a low blow. Dubois hit him with a good body shot, and it's put Usyk down. Your thoughts on the situation?
When I saw it in real time, it looked marginal. This is the hardest way to say it. I'm not sitting on the fence. It looked marginal. I feel like if he hadn't have gone down with it, it'd have been fine. It would just carried on. Like you kind of see those shots get thrown every single weekend, and nothing tends to happen. But obviously, with the force and the fact that you sort of went down and was blowing heavily, there was obviously that sense of the ref called it early in a way as well, so it didn't seem that contentious. But like you say, looking on Twitter, the belt line is relatively high as well. It's above his belly button, etc. He kind of gets hit there. You can kind of make a case either way. I mean, I've seen a lot of reaction, people saying that Dubois got robbed. I'm not entirely convinced he's been robbed, to be perfectly honest. I don't feel like it's been a robbery. I just feel like it's one of those that could have gone either way. And also, let's be honest, Usyk was down, but he took the 5 minutes. But at the same time, you don't know, he could have decided, if it was given a knockdown, would he have got up? Potentially. He didn't know, he was rattled by it, but he wasn't it was obviously reacting to the fact that he had 5 minutes of break. So yeah, for me, it's a tough one, man, because it is marginal. But I wasn't screaming that he was robbed, but equally I was also looking at it going, I don't think he threw it as an intentional low blow, if that makes sense either. He threw it as a body shot and it kind of caught him marginally low. Like you've seen people intentionally throw low blows before and it wasn't that. So I think it was kind of one of those where it's just literally like literally kind of 50-50 call. It's not definitive for me either way, frankly.
Yeah, I don't blame you for not giving an answer because it's a really tricky one. Look, I feel like whilst we're talking, Twitter's blowing up, people are arguing. There's some serious Twitter beef going on right now in the world of boxing. Twitter, it's one of those we may never fully know what's happened. I think Usyk was clearly in quite a lot of pain when it happened, whether it was a low blow or a body shot. But yeah, I agree with you in the sense that I don't really like the narrative of Dubois kind of has been robbed and he should be world champion right now. I don't really get along with that, but I just think that that bit of the fight showed that Dubois did have moments in the fight, whether it was that knockdown or other moments as well. Just to wrap things up, Elliot, obviously kind of in the last couple of years, we've had Joshua and Usyk face each other twice. We had, I think it was 11 months between the first fight and the second fight for a variety of reasons, including the war in Ukraine and getting a location and for the second fight. How do you compare those fights and tonight? Joshua, the first fight, I think most people would have given him 2 or 3 rounds. He was criticised for trying to outbox Usyk. Second fight, did better, I think a lot of people would say, but still won near enough the same amount of rounds he did in the first fight. Compared to Dubois tonight, who maybe kind of went for it a bit more. How do you analyze those 3 fights?
Yeah, well, I agree with that. Fully agree with that. I think first AJ Usyk fight, comprehensive victory for Usyk, frankly. Wasn't really close, and actually I think AJ was quite lucky not to get stopped at the end of that. I think it was that round 11 or 12 when he was on the ropes and Usyk was teeing off on him. I thought it was, I mean, arguably you could say I've seen fights stopped when that's been happened. I've seen refs jump in at different fights and stop fights, and never. I think because it was AJ necessarily at home, he got the benefit of the doubt and got to the end. Second fight, gripped himself a lot better, but I think there was a lot of frustration amongst fans, not necessarily for me. I actually think it was one of his best performances to date, to be perfectly honest with you. But there was a lot of frustration. People sitting there going, hold on a second, you're supposed to be powerful, you're supposed to be bigger, stick it on him essentially, and let's see what happens. And like, you know, if you go out, you go out, but he didn't do that. He tried to sort of box him again and lost, even though it was a better, closer performance actually from boxing wise. Daniel Dubois has gone to Poland tonight on what is essentially a kind of Ukrainian celebration show and has performed admirably. And an inexperienced guy, 25 years old, never been anywhere, not been in with champions. Like AJ been in with champions, had defeated champions, been in with ex-champions. Has never really done that. He's stepped away. He's fought Nathan Gorman, lost to Joe Joyce, and had, you know, a couple of fights where he's become this silver or international ever champion that he currently is. And you feel like you've gone there at that age, taken on a monumental task, you know, unify undisputed champion. You're just sort of you've equipped yourself really well. But I think you've actually stuck it on him. You've tried to use obviously your attributes. You've come in lighter, granted. You've shown better movement than we've expected of you when you've been blasting out these tin cans. But equally, you have some of the, like you said, some of those rounds were competitive. You've thrown shots, you've hit him. All right, the low blow is a low blow, but I don't think it was intentional low blow. You tried to throw a body shot essentially. And yeah, I think, to be honest with you, massive credit. That fight there is more entertaining and more compelling throughout every single round than the rounds you saw with AJ. Because AJ was just going, get started, do something. You're the champion. You're dictating terms. You're getting paid with the A side, and you're just, you know, you're coming out at the end giving a hip hooray, and I'm 18 stone. That's why I'm heavy. Like all that sort of nonsense. It's like, yeah, I think much better performance, frankly. And actually, if those two fought, when we asked that question, if those two fought tomorrow, I'd back Daniel Dubois to beat AJ comfortably.
Yeah, I don't think I've got anything to add to that. I just think that you were just dying for Joshua just to have more of a go in that first Usyk fight in particular. And what was frustrating was, although he performed well in the second fight, a lot of the time it was more of the same. So it was, those fights were frustrating, whereas and at no point in either of those fights did I think Joshua was going to win. Whereas tonight there were bits when I thought Dubois had a chance at times. I'll be honest with you, when he put Usyk down a couple other times as well, it wasn't meant to be. Elliot, thank you very much for your time. Been good to react to this one with you, and we'll see what happens next. But yeah, pleasure as always, mate.
Thank you very much. And yeah, thanks again, guys, for watching.